Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's just about 7:30 and we can get going. My name is Jeremy Fletcher. I'm the vicar here at the Minster, and it's really good on behalf of Churches Together in Beverley, who've been the organisers of this Hustings to welcome you here. And that's all the churches across Beverley. I should particularly thank Richard Bradbury, who leads Churches Together in Beverley, for all the hard work he's done behind the scenes. I get to stand here in the light. But Richard's actually done all the stuff and collected your questions together and made contact with the candidates, so thank you very much for that. I should begin with some sad news that Lee Walton, the Yorkshire First candidate, was taken ill after, I think he'd all been with you all yesterday, was taken ill and is in hospital at the moment, so is not here. And I'm sure your thoughts, your prayers, if you have them, will be very welcome for him. So. To remember him and his family. Just a quick idea of what I hope will be happening tonight. You've all submitted, or many of you have submitted questions. Richard has collected those together. We've shaped them a little bit so that we can get a spread of questions across the range that was submitted to us. And I'll be putting those to the candidates. It might just be that we get a chance to and fro with you in the audience, but I'm particularly interested in the candidates not only answering, but perhaps then having a conversation with themselves, between themselves about that. So just kind of go with me if you will. So I've got there are kind of 12, I think, that we might get to across a range of subjects, and we'll do them in proper question time fashion. Various people have been submitting those through Richard, so they've been coming in over the last couple of weeks. One or two of you tried, even tonight, to ask me one or two. In fact, there are already questions that we've had. I've written down here, be polite. I think, applause is good. Kind of think about anything else that you might want to do. And tap yourselves if you like, or leave it afterwards. So, but let's be generous and listen carefully. It is a public meeting. Not only are members of the press here, but also students from the East Riding College are using this as part of their involvement in the process and are filming it. All the cameras are pointing this way, but if you do want to ensure that you're not involved in this in any way and you're taken out of any bits of the filming, then there are forms at the back of church that you can sign and give to any of the people who are operating the cameras. But they'll be going out on sort of YouTube channels and be used in the various things that Adam and the students are doing. It's really good that you're here. We're looking forward to East Riding College being a bit closer down here than once as the new building happens. The last thing I put down is that you may find yellow envelopes on your seats, which are a means of giving your money to the life and ministry of Beverley Minster. They're not for you. There is no collection tonight, it's just that we have them here ready for Sunday, so don't worry about that, there is no charge for this. I mean, if you want to, that'd be great, but you don't have to. So our candidates, Graham Stewart, Gary Shawes, Richard Howarth, Margaret Pinder, Dennis Healy are here. What I'm going to do is get each candidate to introduce themselves, I'm telling you this now, introduce yourselves in turn, and just give us a sentence, as it were, as to why you're here and what you're aiming at. We'll obviously hear lots more through your answers to the questions. But if we go this time just from Greg and across me, who you are and what you want to do.
Well, thank you, Jeremy, and can I say thank you to everyone who's turned up to have the Minster packed like this is wonderful. And I know all our thoughts will be with Lee and his family after he was fit as a fiddle yesterday and then had a heart attack last night, so we're all thinking about him. I've, as you know, been the Member of Parliament for the last 10 years for Beverley and Holderness, and I've been proud to do that role, and I hope sought to champion everybody, regardless of how they vote, work cross-party as appropriate, and try and make a difference to our community, wherever it is, whether it's in the rural areas or in the heart of Beverley.
Great, thank you.
I'd just like to echo Graham's thoughts and sentiments regards Lee. What I'll be thinking about tonight. The reason why I'm standing, obviously I'm standing for UKIP. I believe we're better than a star on someone else's flag, and we should determine our own laws and legislations. So this election is not only about who governs us, but actually where we're coming from. Whether we're coming from London or Brussels.
And you'll not be surprised to know there's a question about that coming up. So.
Richard Howarth, the Green Party, offering positive change, wanting to reverse inequality, which is approaching Victorian levels in this country, despite the fact that we are one of the richest countries in the world. And the only main English party opposed to fracking, TTIP, and austerity. Thank you.
Yes, Margaret Pinder for the Labour Party. As you and I have been on the Town Council for 4 years, I was town mayor 2 years ago. I grew up in the East Riding, so I'm a local girl, so I know this area very well. I care about it very much. In 2010, I decided that if I wanted to make a difference, I had to actually put my money where my mouth is and step up and take part in the political process. I've gained a very great deal from this country and from this area. Things that my family historically benefited from, education, health, I see being eroded. And I want to stop that erosion and bring a new change in Beverley culture. So we're definitely ready for it. So that's why I'm standing here.
I'm Dennis Healy, the Liberal Democrats. I'm from Beverley. I've lived in Beverley for 25 years. Doesn't seem that long ago since I was getting married at the chancel there. In my day job, I work for the Institution of Mechanical Engineers. I help engineers and apprentices to become professionally registered as engineers. I'm a Liberal Democrat. I'm extremely proud of what the Liberal Democrats have achieved in this government. I think coalition has worked. I think the voice of moderation has built a stronger economy and a fairer society.
Thank you very much for all of that. Brilliant. Just to say that my ambition is that we finish by 9. That's the other thing that you were asking. So first question, the NHS. Is it sufficient for us to be reassured by competing promises of further funding and Sorry, John, I'm going to need some new batteries in this if you're around. There we go. By magic. The NHS. Is it sufficient for us to be reassured by competing promises of further funding and substantially increased recruitment of medical and nursing staff in the face of widespread evidence that there's a critical shortfall locally and nationally? So something generally about the NHS and what promises can be made, not only about funding but also about actually personnel. I'm going to start with Graham, Stuart.
Thank you. Of course, the coalition government came into power 5 years ago, and it was the Conservatives alone of the major parties who promised that the NHS budget must be defended because of an ageing population and increasing pressures. And I'm proud of the fact that it was the Conservatives who led that call, and it was the Labour Party, of course, which opposed it, said it would be irresponsible to protect the NHS budget. And since then, you've seen in Wales cuts to the budget there, which is run by Labour, and a fall in standards there. Whereas in England, we've seen improvement in standards. We've seen nearly 10,000 more doctors, 7,000 more nurses, a reduction in the administration, and significant improvement. And many of you, I know, looking around the Minster here, were with me years ago when we marched through the town opposing the proposal of the then Labour government to shut not just the community hospital in Beverley, but in Hornsey and Withensea, every NHS bed in my constituency. We fought together, we turned that round, and I was proud to see the new Beverley Hospital open under this government a few years ago. If the NHS has been run by the Conservatives for more years than anybody else, it was of course an NHS, it was a Conservative paper in 1944 which set out a proposal for a National Health Service, and of course it was in the Conservative Manifesto in 1945. We've run the NHS for more years than the Labour Party since then. And in every election from 1950 onwards, we've had scaremongering, dishonest, deceitful claims that we were going to privatise it when we had no such plans. And in fact, what we have done is strengthen it. And as the Commonwealth Fund recently found, under the Conservatives, the NHS is now the best health service in the world. And if there's another Conservative government returned with a strong economy to back it, then we can have every confidence the NHS will be there, free at the point of delivery for all of us when we have a need of it.
Margaret.
Well, obviously I take a radically different view, and I think the facts speak for themselves, and I think the experience of people here in the region talking to healthcare professionals paints a very different story. First of all, there's the crisis we've got in A&E. We've got over 1 million people waiting more than 4 hours for A&E. The closages to the walk-in centres have overburdened it. It's getting harder to see a family doctor. Longer waits for cancer treatment, longer waiting lists. And it simply is not the case that the level of funds that are needed are being made available. When the coalition leave office, and I mean leave office, with the NHS was in the red for the first time in a decade, with a deficit of 800 billion compared with a surplus of 600 billion when they took over in 2010. I think another 5 years until we will have lost the NHS as we know it, and I think it was one of the great achievements of this nation. In 2009, 83% of UK healthcare was in public hands, and now private sector contracts account for 40 billion. And the UK Statistics Authority has had to write to Jeremy Hunt more than once to ask him to revise his claims on NHS spending having increased. The top-down reform, which David Cameron promised would happen, that's one of many broken promises, wasted 1.1 billion, that's according to the National Audit Office. The blood plasma service has been sold to US hedge funds. That's what's happening. That's the kind of privatisation we're seeing. The 2012 Health and Social Care Act expanded the role of private medical firms, and among the chief beneficiaries of these significant donors to the Tory party. I think we are seeing privatisation. It's no longer creeping, it's naked, it's raw. The NHS could be excluded from TTIP, which would make it vulnerable to contracts from the US, like the blood plasma service. The government has chosen not to do that. I think those facts speak for themselves, and that's why I think another 5 years of the Tory coalition will be an absolute catastrophe for the great service that we all deserve and we all enjoy here.
Would it be possible just very briefly to respond? There are a whole series of inaccuracies in there. Just to pick up on one, the lead negotiator for the EU explicitly has stated, and therefore we must stop scaremongering, that health is excluded from TTIP and will not be affected, just for the record.
That's the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is about relationships between the EU and the States. And, there may be a question that can be later on, but thank you. Yeah, I think points of immediate clarification, okay, and then a conversation across us at the end when all 5 of us have done, I think, because the NHS is clearly a major thing, but thank you for that. Gary, sure.
We believe that funding for the NHS should be directed at frontline services, doctors, nurses. Under Labour, 190 million pound a year was spent on managers. By 2010, it was over £1 billion a year was spent on managers in the NHS. Rocketed by 450%. The number of managers have increased by 58%. So we need to see more nurses, more doctors, actually people who are dealing with this, not pain pushers. One way we could review the NHS and strip up some of the middle management where work is duplicated. That's millions, we'd reinvest £3 billion back into the NHS, £1 billion into elderly social care. Labour also started actual privatisation of the NHS itself. They got it up to 4.5%. They came up with a disastrous PFI project, lumbering the NHS with £220 billion worth of debt, which we'll have to keep paying. This is all forgotten about. Alan Milburn, MP, he actually introduced foundation trusts and PFI schemes, and strangely enough, he's a consultant for a private health firm, so we can see who's pulling the strings behind Labour's schemes there. So we need the money to be directed at GPs, which would retain as free, same as NHS, free point of access. Millions of pounds have also been wasted on a multi-million-pound computer scheme for the NHS, which was scrapped in 2013, which was started under Labour as well. You give Labour the pot of money, they don't know what to do with it. They're like kids in a sweet shop, just throw it at it. It needs to be directed and focused.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis.
When the Liberal Democrats came into coalition, we had two key purposes. The first was to rescue the economy from the mess that Labour left it in. And secondly, it was to invest fairly in our public services. Critical and key to that was the NHS. Now, we insisted that the NHS budget was protected in real terms, and that did actually happen, which is why we've been able to recruit 10,000 more doctors and 7,000 more nurses, because that expenditure has increased in real terms. But what you'll also get with the Liberal Democrats is a cast iron guarantee that that funding will continue, because the NHS needs more than fine words. It needs hard cash. Not only does expenditure need to increase in real terms to do the things it needs to do, but Simon Stevens, who is the Chief Executive of NHS England, has been very clear that the NHS requires an extra £8 billion on top of that. The reality is that the Liberal Democrats are the only party that have not only promised that money, but have demonstrated where it's going to come from. And we're very, very clear about that. There will be targeted tax changes on the wealthy, on the banks, on people who can afford to pay. There will be a layered tax on properties worth over £2 million. There will be changes to pension contributions for higher rate taxpayers, because those with the broadest shoulders need to put money in to support our NHS. The other thing that we've been delighted to do is to put mental health on the front page of our manifesto. Nobody would have believed only a year ago as a party would think that mental health is that important to be on the front page of an election manifesto. Well, it is. And to be honest, mental health has had a raw deal in the past, because it's not had parity with physical health. And we've been proud to have put in as a government £500 million a year extra into things like talking therapies and reducing waiting times for mental health. And with the Liberal Democrats, you will get that. The funding is clear. We will have either a Labour-led or a Conservative-led government. And you can rest assured that whichever one it is, we will insist that that £8 billion goes in to keep this first-class, world-class health service that this country has and will continue to have.
Richard. Thank you. Yeah, we will fight for publicly funded NHS free at point of use. That is one of our fundamental things in our manifesto, and also for much higher resources for mental health. I find it really quite staggering that Graham Stewart can claim that the NHS is not being privatised. Many of you will work in it, or you will know people who work in it, and we see it everywhere, from cleaning services to ambulance services. It is happening, and it's been happening for a long time. It started with PFIs for quite a long time, so we reverse that, and that is also one of the reasons why the NHS is struggling with resources, because this is really a transfer of our money, our tax money, into private hands and hands of private companies, and that should be reversed. The question was also about funding and how can you trust where the funding is coming from. One thing where we do differ on the other parties is, yeah, we've got a fully cost manifesto, but when other parties say it's a protected area, what they're really saying is we're going to cut funding in other areas. We've got a manifesto which clearly says, and it's quite clear, which not all the manifestos are, on what areas we will cut and which ones we won't, and it's all there and fully costed. And a final mention on that, in the 2010 manifestos, all the parties laid out their costs based on how much they thought the economy would grow. And it's worth pointing out that everybody got that completely wrong. but the Green Party was the closest of all of them. And that is worth bearing in mind because we'll make some claims this evening about things that we would invest in and how we can do it. And it's worth remembering that that is based on realistic assumptions.
Thank you. Just for the rest of the evening, the longer you clap, the less we get to listen. So, be brief as it were. Some of us spent a couple of hours talking about the NHS at a question time about 3 or 4 weeks ago, which I was privileged to be a part of. So this is a huge subject. I do want to give candidates now the opportunity to kind of talk back to each other. There have been some claims made about each party and what people have said. So, Graham, certainly you received a challenge there about privatisation, which I'm sure you want to come back on.
Well, the most important thing is to make sure that you have the best service delivered, that it's free at the point of use. And if Marie Curie or Macmillan Cancer can provide a better service than a publicly funded, publicly provided service, then that's a better place to be. And what we've done is put the power in the hands of GPs precisely so they can commission the best possible service at the best possible price within what is ultimately a finite budget. But I'm delighted to say, Jeremy, that not only at the 2010 election were we the only major party that made a commitment to protect the NHS budget in real terms, but we've also said we will do so again, and we will meet in full that £8 billion a year budget required by 2020. And how will we be able to fund that? The same way that we've been able to fund the £7 billion in real terms increase that we brought in this Parliament by getting people back to work. Do you remember when we were told that the Conservative policies would lead to 1 million people losing their jobs? Instead, more people have gained jobs, real jobs, full-time jobs, high-quality jobs, contrary to what you hear from so many. 2 million more people are now in work, and it's a fantastic achievement. And because there are 1,000 more jobs every day, we plan to have 1,000 more people in work every day in the next Parliament. It's only by having a strong economy, by getting people into work, paying taxes, that we can pay for the NHS. And I'm proud that we've done it.
Where's the money going to come from, Jeremy? That's the key point. That Graham makes promises here based on pie in the sky. The reality is, ask him now, I'll ask you, Graham, where are you going to raise this money now? It's no good just saying the economy is going to be great, there's going to be more people in work. You do not know what is going to happen. The reality is, you have £12 billion worth of spending cuts up your sleeve. You have not said where this £8 million is going to come from. So put your cards on the table and tell us, because I've told you the taxes that we will increase to find the money. It doesn't grow on trees.
So we've already gone.
Just to say, the next question is going to be about public sector cuts. So that element of it will be coming up next. Graham to answer and then Richard.
Well, as I said, in 2010, the past state of the economy, we didn't know exactly where every penny was going to come from, but we set out our strategy. We put in place the long-term economic plan that has meant that we've doubled the number of apprenticeships. We've created more jobs, not just than Germany, Italy, Spain, France, Belgium, Holland, not just more than those countries, any of those countries individually, but more jobs than all of them put together. It's a transformative impact on our economy, and the big question for everyone in this room tonight is whether we want to continue with that recovery which has delivered for the NHS and delivered jobs and delivered economic strength, or we want to go back to the chaos, ruin, misery that the Labour government.
Thank you. We're focusing NHS and the key question to speak where the funding is coming from. Richard?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to quickly say that, so we've gone from the NHS is not being privatised to, oh, well, okay, it is being privatised, but it's to people like Macmillan Cancer Care. Does anyone really believe that the majority of the contracts that are being given out are going to charities and social enterprises? Of course they're not. They're going to huge multinational companies, often which aren't even owned by people outside this country. That's what's really going on, and that's where the money's being transferred to.
Let's go for Margaret and then Gary if you want to.
Okay, right, I'm sorry on the NHS and so many things, which people are simply not buying what you're selling. Except you are selling the NHS now. 70%, almost 70% of contracts are going into the private sector. If you think a change from a deficit, a surplus of 600 million to a deficit of 800 million is saving the NHS, then your economic figures absolutely baffle me. The Institute of Fiscal Studies actually identified swingeing cuts to public services. George Osborne was asked 16 times where the 8 billion he suddenly was promising for the NHS in a panic was going to come from. 16 times. He couldn't answer. I think that tells us all we need to know.
Thank you. Gary, if you'd like to.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, all we've heard so far is like, we want to privatise it. Labour actually started privatising it, got up to 4.8% privatised under Labour, increased by another 1.5% under the Tories. Lib Dems, their idea is increased taxation. Well, I look at my pay packet, see how much I'm saving in a month, and we have taxed far too much. If you are in debt in the state we are, there are only two things you can do. Increase your income, reduce your outgoings. And we have outgoings going on fancy projects, vanity projects, the HS2, money can be diverted from there. The Institute of Financial Affairs estimate that to be £80 billion. That can be redirected into our NHS. We propose £3 billion a year onto frontline services, not middle management, which has got bloated under these two successive governments.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure all the candidates will be delighted to stay on at the end and receive things about this as well. I'll happily lock up whenever the last person leaves. But thank you for that. One sentence. This is the last question that was on the list that Richard supplied to me. Why, oh why, do you want to be an MP? I've started right, so as it were, there's Dennis and then this way. Why, oh why do you want to be an MP?
Because I think I can make a difference, and you may hear that's a standard sort of answer, but I stood for Parliament, this is the third time I stood for Parliament. I do it because I have a set of views that really revolve around fairness, and as I see a stronger economy, a fairer society, and I'd like to make that happen in this area, in this city, in this town, in this rural area where I've lived the last 25 years.
Dennis, thank you.
Because you come to things sometimes when you're ready for them. I'm not a career politician. I've wide experience. I've worked all over the world. This region, this area has given me a huge amount. I have values that I see are needed in this area. The changes is needed. I have a track record as a politician as well. I know I have the skills. I know I have the quality to actually bring the difference and the change to this region that I believe it's ready for. And I hope you believe that too. Thank you.
Richard,
quite simply to make the world a better place and we bring some much needed compassion and fairness into politics.
Gary?
I look around the country, speak to people, and I see how we've all been let down. Those people that have been eyes by legacy parties. I used to believe in Britain, believe that Britain can stand on its own 2 feet. We don't have to be a lapdog to Brussels or anyone else. Now I believe I can get out there and actually make a difference. Like I said at the start, we are better than the stars on some country's flag. We stand proud on our own.
Thank you. Graham?
Thank you. Why do you want to be an MP? It's a huge privilege, and although whatever the public buffeting and scrutiny you put up with, actually, being part of a community, working together to make things better, is worthwhile. And it's very easy always to focus on what's wrong in society. There's so much that's good in our society, in this area. You should champion that, celebrate that, and work together on it. Whichever one of these guys you think is best for you, please get more involved. Being an MP isn't the only role. There's roles for everyone, from activists to councillors. Just get involved, because actually it's people working together who can improve our society. I know so many people in this room volunteer already, but actually volunteer with political parties too. Stronger political parties and democratic engagement is good for the country. Being an MP is an enormous privilege, and though some of you will doubt this, actually nearly all the time, a fantastic pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Rustin, because I think it's rather wonderful and a great way to end. Thank you for your attention, and thank you particularly to our candidates who engage with each other in all sorts of ways, very personally and happily, and then kind of get the political sort out where necessary. But it's been a really collaborative and helpful thing altogether. I'm sure the conversations will continue. Can I thank you, and would you now thank finally our candidates for all they've given? about certain questions, and I wanted to get other things in, so apologies for certain questions didn't get asked. But thank you for your thanks, and do keep engaging with the candidates now. Thank you.